Hello and welcome to our SBOC, or Scrum Product Owner Certified course.
Now let's look at the mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of Estimate User Stories process. The mandatory inputs are Scrum Core Team, User Stories, and User Stories acceptance criteria. For a detailed explanation of these inputs, please refer to the discussions on these in the Create User Stories process. The tool that is to be mandatorily used as part of this process is estimation methods. Numerous estimation methods can be used as tools to estimate user stories. Some important tools are: let's begin with Wideband Delphi. Wideband Delphi is a group-based estimation technique for determining how much work is involved and how long it will take to complete. Individuals within a team anonymously provide estimations for each item, and the initial estimates are plotted on a chart. The team then discusses the factors that influence their estimates and proceed to a second round of estimation. This process is repeated until the estimates of individuals are close to each other and a consensus for the final estimates can be reached. The second technique is planning poker. It is also called estimation poker. It is a derivative of the Wideband Delphi technique. This is an estimation technique which uses consensus to estimate relative sizes of user stories or the effort required to create them. Next technique is Fist of Five. It is a simple and fast mechanism that can be used as an estimation practice as well as a general group consensus building technique. After initial discussion on a given item for estimation, the Scrum team members are each asked to vote on a scale of 1 to 5 using their fingers. Used as an estimation tool, the number of fingers displayed indicate the relative estimation value. The value in using this technique is not only consensus building, but also driving discussion because team members are asked to explain the reason for their estimates. Used as a general consensus building technique, the proposal or pending decision under consideration is initially discussed. Then, the team members vote based on their level of agreement and desire for discussion. If a team member raises one finger, it means he or she disagrees with the group's conclusion and has major concerns. If a team member raises 2 fingers, it means he or she disagrees with the group's conclusion and would like to discuss some minor issues. If a team member raises 3 fingers, it means he or she is not sure and would like to go with the group's consensus conclusion. If a team member raises 4 fingers, it means he or she agrees with the group's conclusion and would like to discuss some minor issues. And if a team member raises 5 fingers, it means he or she wholeheartedly agrees with the group's conclusion. The last technique is Affinity Estimation. It is a technique used to quickly estimate a large number of user stories. Using sticky notes or index cards and tape, the team places user stories on a wall or other surface in order from small to large. For this, each team member begins with a subset of user stories from the overall prioritized product backlog to place by relative size. This initial placement is done in silence. Once everyone has placed their user stories on the wall, the team reviews all of the placements and may move user stories around as appropriate. The second part of the exercise involves discussion. Finally, the product owner will indicate some sizing categories on the wall. These categories can be small, medium, or large, or they may be numbered using story point values to indicate relative size. The team will then move user stories into these categories as the final step in the process. Some key benefits of this approach are that the process is very transparent, visible to everyone, and is easy to conduct. The mandatory output of this process is estimated user stories. After the user stories are estimated by the Scrum team using the various estimation techniques discussed in this section, they are considered to be estimated user stories. The next process is Commit User Stories. The mandatory inputs of this process are Scrum Core Team, estimated user stories, and length of sprint. For detailed explanation of these inputs, please refer to the discussion on them in Develop Epics, Estimate User Stories, and Conduct Release Planning Processes. The mandatory tools used in this process are Sprint Planning Meeting and Communication Techniques. The Sprint Planning Meeting is used by the Scrum team in the Commit User Stories process to plan the work to be done in the sprint. The team reviews the estimated user stories in order to commit the user stories which they can deliver within the sprint. The mandatory output of this process is Committed user stories. The Scrum team commits to a subset of estimated user stories that they believe they can complete in the next sprint based upon velocity. The committed user stories should also be selected per the priorities defined by the product owner.
Another output is Sprint Backlog. The list of the user stories to be executed by the Scrum team in the upcoming sprint is called the Sprint Backlog. This is a subset of the prioritized product backlog that contains the committed user stories that are assigned to a particular sprint. The sprint backlog will be further refined with task-level details as sprint planning continues. It is common practice for the sprint backlog user stories and associated tasks to be represented on a Scrum board or similar task board, which provides a constantly visible depiction of the current status of the user stories in the product backlog. Once the sprint backlog is finalized and committed to by the Scrum team, new user stories should not be added. If new requirements arise during a sprint, they should be added to the prioritized product backlog to be considered for a future sprint.
Now let's discuss the mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of Identify Task process. The mandatory inputs, tools, and outputs of this process are Scrum Core Team, committed user stories, acceptance criteria, sprint planning meetings, task list, and updated Scrum board, respectively. For a better understanding of Scrum Core Team, please refer to the discussion on the inputs of the Create User Stories and Estimate User Stories processes. The tool that must be used mandatorily in this process is Sprint Planning Meetings. In Sprint Planning Meetings, the Scrum team plans the work to be done in the sprint by reviewing the committed user stories at the top of the prioritized product backlog. The product owner is present during this meeting to clear ambiguities related to user stories in the prioritized product backlog. This meeting should be time-boxed, with the standard length limited to 2 hours per week of the sprint duration. This assists in preventing the tendency to stray into discussions that should actually occur in other meetings, like the release planning or sprint review meetings. The mandatory output of this process is Task List. The task list is a comprehensive list that contains all the tasks to which the Scrum team has committed for the current sprint. It contains description of each task along with estimates derived during the Create Task process. The task list must include any testing and integration efforts so that the product increment from the sprint can be successfully integrated into the deliverables from previous sprints. Even though tasks are often activity-based, the level of granularity to which the tasks are decomposed is decided by the Scrum team.
Another mandatory output of this process is Updated Scrum Board. As tasks are identified, the Scrum board is updated to show the tasks associated with each user story. Tasks are typically shown on sticky notes placed on a physical Scrum board or as entries under the applicable user stories when using an electronic Scrum project tool. During implementation, as the team adds, assigns, and updates tasks being worked on, the Scrum board keeps getting updated with the additional tasks and status of each task. If the team has estimated the tasks, the task estimates are also depicted on the Scrum board.
Estimate Tasks process. This is an optional process which involves creating task estimates if the Scrum team sees value in doing so. In this process, the Scrum team estimates the effort required to accomplish each task in the task list. Task estimates could either be determined at the beginning of the sprint for all user stories or tasks relevant to that sprint, or for each task just before the team starts working on the particular user story or task. The estimation can be done using the same methods that were used for the Estimate User Stories process. Sprint Planning Meetings. As part of the sprint planning meetings, the Scrum team estimates the effort required to complete a task or set of tasks and to estimate the people effort and other resources required to carry out the task within a given sprint. The Scrum team members use the task list to estimate the effort for the user stories to be completed in the sprint. One of the key benefits of this technique is that it enables the team to have a shared perspective of the user stories and requirements so that they can reliably estimate the effort required.
Update Sprint Backlog process. In this process, the Scrum Core team updates the sprint backlog with task details and, if available, the task estimates. The updated sprint backlog will be used in the implement phase to track the team's progress during the upcoming sprint. Thank you for learning with us!